Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. My name is Zulfikar Heather. I am a chartered accountant and a banker by experience. I have significant experience in consulting with three of the four major accounting firms, as well as I work with two major global financial institutions based out of Canada, and I've worked globally in most of the major countries across the globe. I'm really passionate about this subject, which is Islamic banking or how Riba came into being and how inflation affects us on a day to day basis. So, hear me out. There would be some thoughts that are very useful for you. These are my personal reflections. I'm not a alim, but I have significant experience in banking and finance. These are very complex, sensitive, and debated topic, so opinions would differ. So yeah, I'm sure people will have diverse opinions. Do your own research, understand what other people are saying, and then come up with a position before deciding on anything. Your feedback is very useful to me. Please do be respectful and constructive in your feedback. My presentation is in six parts. The first part, I'll take you through the history of money and the definition of money so that you understand what I'm saying. This history is very useful for you to go through the later concepts, which I'll go through. I'll give you an overview of how fiat money was created, and which we use today for all the transaction. I'll give you how fiat money is debased by the actions of our governments and how you need to save yourself from that. I may give you some key concepts. Most of you may already know it, so you could skip section 4 if you have economics background or banking background. I'll go into Islamic banking in section 5 and give you a bit of the Quran, what Quran says and Hadith say about riba. And then I'll give you what our next steps are. Hopefully, you'll find it very useful. Why I chose this topic is that many of the people that I know do not engage in banking. They don't obtain mortgages to buy houses, or they do rudimentary financing and investments because they consider that most of this is haram. I think it's very important to understand what the underlying reasons are before you take a decision. For most of the people today, it's very impossible to save because of inflation and rising prices of houses, the currency depreciation. You do not get a chance to actually save enough to do an outright purchase of the house. And that is why it's very important to understand this topic. Um, there are many different camps. There are three different camps primarily on Islamic banking. There are people who say it's completely halal and only Islamic banking is halal, everything else is haram. There are other people who think Islamic banking is completely haram because it takes fundamental system based on riba and then puts a sugar coating on it and comes up with Islamic names for the same product, which is pure deception, and we should have stay away from it. I'm from the third camp, which says both conventional and Islamic banking are halal, but you need to look at every single product to see is there usury in it, is there really aspects that you need to avoid. Is it doing risk taking, meaning are the banks really taking risk and measuring and jumping into transactions with open eyes, knowing exactly what risk they're taking, and is it there to protect the borrowers and lenders before you get into anything. Before going further, it's very important to understand what money is. Money is, or whatever you want to call it, money, pesa, mal, it's a store of value, something that you can hold to store value. It's a medium of exchange where you can actually use this as a medium of exchanging in the market. You can go buy and sell things and use it as a medium. It's a unit of account, meaning you can actually measure how much you're paying. Like $100 is $100 in Toronto and Vancouver. Every place it's the same standard. It's also a standard for deferred payment, so you can actually decide on the price of good after 5 years and say, I'm going to pay you such and such amount after 5 years. It's something that is reasonably valuable enough to be used for future deferred payments. Money is only valuable if you trust it. If you do not trust it, then it doesn't have any value. It's important to understand how money has evolved over time. When humans started, they started to do favors to each other. Somebody will go and build somebody else's hut or hunt an animals, and those favors could be exchanged later. Slowly, the villages grew and they started accumulating livestock, and farms were created. So, those were sort of a storage of wealth. And as they grew, they would exchange their goods with other cities or other villages. And they would travel in caravans and they would take the goods from one place to another and exchange it for different value. And slowly, they would actually come up with simple standards of how to exchange. And that's where seashells or metals or other things were created as an exchange in value. IOUs were also used quite late, like in by the 11th century. Instead of carrying gold from one city to another, people started issuing IOUs, which could be exchanged, so you never needed to carry the heavy amount of metals with you in the caravan. Slowly that paper money, which was IOU, really became paper money. So these were issued by sovereigns or large banks, and they could be exchanged for every type of transaction. Few years later, it was converted into fiat money. I really want you to concentrate on that when I come to that topic. It's very important for you to understand. And today, digital money is coming in. The future is all about digital money, and we need to understand how we live in this world with new definitions of money. In the early days of Islam, in Prophet Muhammad's days, Roman and Persian coins were used because Arabs did not have their own coins. Their society has not developed enough at that time to be able to issue their own coins. They used whatever was available from the Romans and Persian at that time. In addition, they had dates and grain and other things that were stored as value as well. Slowly, the Islamic dinars in a time of 685 CE, they started to issue their own coins, and slowly, Muslim world also had their own coinage. As trade grew, the weight and purity of the underlying coin became very important because traders were not only doing trade within their own country, they were actually traveling across the globe, like from China to Europe, through Middle East and Asia. So there were different traders in between who would actually look at the weight and the purity of the underlying coin to determine the value of exchange. And as goods traded from one place to another, the value could be transferred based on the underlying gold and silver. Now, remember, at this time, people were actually carrying gold, and it became very hard because there were bandits on the road, and it became very dangerous to trade. In the undivided India, there were different type of coins that were used. Kauri was used, which was seashells. There used to be putti kauri, kauris, damri, dela, paisa, and rupiah. Even rupiah of today is not worth much, but at that time it contained a lot of value. And putti kauri was the least valuable thing, the lowest denomination. And you must have heard in dramas or pictures that I don't even have a putty cordy in my pocket at the moment. As the trade grew, it was very hard to take the metals from one place to another. Chinese in the 11th century came up with IOU. So they would actually issue a piece of paper. This is after paper was invented, that they would take the metal, keep the metal, and issue a piece of paper, which would be an IOU. So you could take the IOU from one place to another. The Muslim governments and traders started to utilize that as well very early, and they come up with their own bill of exchange, debt transfer, and other tax instruments which were actually used for trade. In the 17th century, a major turn happened where bankers in London started to issue IOUs, which were used as banknotes or checks, which was very useful for trading. But this also led to fractional banking, which is a key thing that you need to understand, where the bankers, when they started to hold gold, they would not issue just the same amount of paper, they would issue more. And they would technically lend out more money than they actually had. This fractional banking is where a lot of problems with the money started.